right, let's kick it off. Thanks so much to everybody for joining. I'm really excited to dive into today's webinar, how to cut out manual tasks and embrace e-commerce automation in 2025. Got a couple experts along for the ride with us. I'll introduce them and give a quick summary of why we're here, why this discussion matters, and then a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll dive into essentially a fireside chat, talking about some topics that I know each of these panelists discuss regularly with merchants and other organizations, and we'll get into it and then have time for questions at the end. All right, so without further ado, some introductions. We have Nate Johnson, Director of Product and Client Success at Motivate. Motivate is an order automation software. And then we have Brooke Toner, Sales Engineer at Vertex, which is a tax compliance software. And then I'm Cody Norris, Head of Sales at Wagento. We're a B2B commerce agency. I'm so really thankful to have each of you here. I know you guys bring a lot of expertise from your various specialties. And it really, the reason we put this together is what each of us do really overlaps nicely along the lines of what do we do with commerce automation in 2025? AI is obviously, has its ubiquitous influence. We have thinning margins due to tariffs and market instability. And so the merchants I talk with, and I think the same is true for Nate and Brooke, they're looking at how do we find more revenue? How do we trim costs? And that's their primary focus right now. Whether it's this quarter, this year, that's the nature of business. And so, anything that we talk about relating to these merchants and the problems they're facing has to address finding more revenue and trimming costs. Otherwise, it's just falling on deaf ears. So in this session, we'll look at how does automation do that? How can it streamline operations? How can it enhance customer experience, AKA find more revenue? And then ultimately, as a result of both those, increase profitability. So that's what we'll dig into. And again, the format is a fireside chat. So this is not a series of sales pitches, which I think you'll be relieved to hear. We're really going to talk about problems we're facing, objections we're hearing, pushback we're getting from merchants, and this may resonate with the number of you. I'm going to be the moderator here. I'm going to really push back against what I'm hearing from Nate and Brooke, because that's what merchants do. That's their role is to say, are you sure this is going to be better than status quo? And if not, I need to move on with my day. There's a lot to do if you're at a manufacturer, distributor, wholesaler, just to keep the business running. And so this better be worth it. And I think that is kind of the barometer or the litmus test for any decision. So without kind of belaboring the point, let's dig in to some questions. And I think some of the findings will happen along the way. There will be a Q&A time at the end. So feel free to drop questions in the chat at any time. But certainly at the end, we'll make time for Q&A. So bring your hardest questions and we'll give them all to Nate.
Thanks.
Or Brooke, just not to me. No, just kidding. Okay, so let's start it up at a really high level, and then we'll zero in on things like order automation, tax compliance, and look at how does automation help? Where is it worth it? Where is it not? At a high level, and I'll just kind of throw this out there for either of you, Brooke and Nate. At a high level, how will automation help a business that requires high touch as a part of its selling processes? Because that's B2B, right? It's almost all high touch, high level of, considered purchases, education, whatever you want to call it. So is automation really going to work there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question that we run into fairly often. A lot of our customers are doing kind of a lot of back and forth with their customers before they actually get to the point where they're taking an order. So what kind of view is the real benefit and the value of AI is taking some of those more tedious things and surfacing them or taking care of them in general for those reps. Because yeah, we want these reps to have that kind of human interaction. We want to go back and forth with the client, talk to them, build those relationships. So if we can superpower those reps and turn them into these amazing reps that remember order history and buying patterns and things like that, and then can turn around a 100-line order in a matter of a minute or two, rather than taking all day to punch that order in. So all these things, the real promise of AI is taking away those tedious things that nobody wants to do, so we can have that kind of human relationship. And I think probably I'll come back to that kind of idea a lot throughout this, but we really believe in that.
Yeah, that's good. I've got a couple friends that are attorneys, and we were getting together last night and talking about AI in our different fields. And that was basically the summary for them too, is, hey, the grunt work of research is made much more instantaneous. But the and the strategy and in the case of e-commerce, the discussions with the customers, the consulting, all of that is still very much needed. It's just, you got more time for it, basically. Another question, again, starting kind of broad in scope, and then we'll get into things more in their particulars. We're talking about you guys obviously represent a couple different softwares. Can't merchants just kind of leverage AI, on their own? I mean, they've got tools like ChatGPT on their hands. I mean, isn't it just a matter of getting creative enough to kind of solve some of this stuff with tools they already have?
Yeah, Brooke, do you want that one, or I'm happy to take that? Either way.
Yeah, why don't you start and then I'll jump in?
Sure, okay. So, I mean, yeah, anybody can jump on ChatGPT and start playing around and get a lot of really good things, good answers out of it and good resources. I do that all day long. I've got ChatGPT open and it's helping me, write emails and define attributes for products and all kinds of things like that. But AI is still AI. If if you've used it all, you get weird responses sometimes. It can be wildly inaccurate at times, and other times it can be super helpful. So I think you see a lot of kind of custom dev shops popping up too that says, yeah, we'll do any AI software for you that you want. But there is a lot more to it than just throwing a lot of things at AI and getting a good response out of it. You kind of have to build in a lot of safeguards around it and make sure that it's actually doing what you want. And then when it gives you responses, you have to build safeguards around the responses too, because the responses aren't always accurate. So I think everyone can and maybe even should be using AI assistants here and there, like have it do some of this tedious work for you. But when your business process is going to rely on it and in a core way, not just your one-off prompts here and there, you really need more than just ChatGPT or something along those lines. You need something that is purpose-built with all those safeguards in place, and understanding the industry and all that, and how kind of the responses need to be tooled. So you should, I think you ought to, but also take a look at the people that are taking the time and doing the years of research into making their responses reliable enough to be core to your business process.
Brooke, what would you add?
And you know what, I couldn't not agree more with that, honestly, because just like you said, Nate, I use ChatGPT all day long, right? But I use it for things that, I'm comfortable using it for, kind of as you just described. Models where maybe I am kind of the subject matter expert and I understand when, the responses I'm getting are kind of just out of left field and not accurate at all. I think what's really important when we're talking about kind of industry-specific AI tools, and even AI tools built into our, specific or particular pieces of software, I think it's important to remember that the subject matter experts are the ones who are training these models, right? And with that being said, the whole point of automation is to spend less time doing tasks that don't necessarily add a whole lot of value. I think a lot of time could possibly be spent trying to create and train and, develop an AI model for something like order management or for tax compliance, where, again, you probably don't need to dedicate all of those hours and weeks of resource time when we have it built for you. So just my 2 cents there.
Yeah. And the ones I talk with, typically they've been doing business a certain way for years, and they've been successful in doing it that way. These are large, mid-market to large wholesalers, manufacturers, and they've got sales teams, they've got customer service people, they've got customer success managers, right? They've got teams built around, and they are subject matter experts on their catalog. So when we talk about automation, there's a big concern that it's going to throw a wrench in the works, right? I mean, the models are not fully trusted, and the data is lacking at these organizations. Most of them will say it that they'll straightforward and say, look, there's tribal knowledge. We understand our products really, really. Now, have we documented it? Well, maybe not like we should. And where this data going to come from to empower automation? Whether it's about our products or about, our processes. And so I think there's a real hesitancy from these types of B2B commerce businesses to lean on automation. And so, I'll back again and say, okay, you guys may not be the subject matter experts on these businesses, right? Motivate and Vertex, maybe they've not worked with a wire and cabling business that's quite like, ours, if I'm speaking from the merchant's perspective. Help me understand where automation is still possible, still beneficial. Again, painting in broad strokes, and then we'll get into the weeds of order management and tax compliance.
Yeah, I think for me, it's really interesting to look at the intersection of AI and the automation it can do combined with the subject matter experts, the actual reps. So I was talking to a friend who did sales at like a construction distribution kind of place. And I asked him, what makes good sales? Like if you're talking to a customer, they send you an order, how do you upsell them? What do you do there? And his whole point was really understanding the customer and what they're doing. So the example I gave was somebody building a deck. They came in, ordered some Phillips screws, and he tried to convince them to get some Torx screws, which are more expensive, going to make his life a whole lot easier. So they went through the process, the customer loved it, and now they're buying the more expensive screws every time they come in, right? So AI is going to look at that order, and it has no way of knowing that they're building a deck, right? So AI is going to say, here's all the products that they have, and then the rep can say, okay, now I know I have this relationship with this customer. I can go in there and use my expertise to refine that. But that rep probably isn't memorizing order history. They haven't dove into the data and tried to extract trends. And so how's that rep ever going to pull that information out? They are subject matter experts in what they're doing, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes where we have a lot of opportunity to extract more and give more information to them. So I don't see, AI and processing like that cutting jobs. I don't think that's it. I think the real magic is when we combine those two, those subject matter experts with the AI that can do the deep research and figure out what needs to, or what can be added on top of that expertise.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's get into tax and order automation. We'll start on the side. So merchants I talk with, they've either got tax tables they're managing in their e-commerce platform, and they're updating manually. They've got somebody who's deep in the weeds of that side of finance. They've got some type of tax compliance tool. Let's talk, Brooke, about what manuals are cut out. I mean, that's part of our title today, like cutting out manual tasks. So if you have a tax compliance software, like Vertex, what manual tasks do you no longer have to do?
Yeah, great question. So I think right off of the bat, the first example that you provided there, where you're having a resource in-house who is responsible for maintaining a tax rate table in usually a commerce system, but I mean, normally it's in more system than one, right? I think right off the bat, immediately what tax automation is going to provide is, well, I guess just take that entire step away, right? With our integration to these various e-commerce platforms, it's a live API web service call right from the e-commerce system out to Vertex. So there is no requirement to store any of these rates or rules in the e-commerce platform anymore. There's no responsibility for someone in finance or tax to be maintaining these, updating these, that's kind of the beauty of, the Vertex software. We have a team of 120 or so people that are dedicated to tax research. That's our tax research department. So they're the ones who are maintaining, the 18,000 global jurisdictions and all the special rates and rules of indirect tax that could go along with it. So right off the bat, having that, person who's probably responsible for 50 other things, we're taking one task off of their plate, right? They're no longer responsible for trying to maintain the rates and the rules of where they're selling and of what they're selling. So that's the one step. But then it goes a little bit further than that, right? So you mentioned compliance. Another activity that is, not wasteful by any means, but that is definitely kind of hard on time, it's going to be the filing of returns every month, every quarter, every year, whatever that cadence may be. So a lot of times that same individual who is kind of responsible for plugging in those rates into the system, at the end of the month, they're also responsible for taking that transactional data, that sales data, and the taxes that they collected and submitting that information back to the state, right? We can take that step off of your plate as well. So not only are we automating that transactional reporting, we also have services to take the returns filing out of your hands. So again, instead of, spending days, weeks kind of reconciling this data and organizing it and getting it into the state-specific format, Vertex can do that for you. So kind of just two main pieces of automation that really end up saving our customers a ton of time downstream.
Great. That makes sense. One of the things I've seen is manufacturers and distributors, many of them do a really high GMV with a relatively small team. And so it's really cool. I mean, these business models are really efficient and successful. But because of the small team, if they want to try something new, if they want to open up a new sales channel, if they want to go test a different marketplace or try D2C, trying a new channel, there's a lot of red tape internally. Might not be the best term, but there's a lot to navigate internally when you open up a new channel. And there's nobody there to do it, or very few people there to kind of think all of that through. And one thing I've seen is there could be a wide road to doing business in a new channel, but the returns filing process, who's going to handle that? How is it going to even think about that, given everything else they're balancing? And so a lack of automation can, not only be an inefficiency with the things you're juggling today, but can be a roadblock to testing new channels or doing forms of business. And I think that goes right in line with what you were just saying, Brooke, that if there are easier ways to do it, they're worth considering because they may not only save you money today, but open up opportunities tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really important point. Overall, automating these types of tasks and activities are going to kind of eliminate that risk that might be what holds people back from, selling into a new state or opening a new sales channel or things like that. So definitely an important point.
Let's go to motivate for a second. You talked a little bit about empowering the reps, right? Sales, customer service, whatever they may be called at the organization, giving them really rich kind of historical data at their fingertips on what this customer has done in the past. A lot of these businesses, their customer service is their differentiator. Maybe they're selling a commodity, the pricing's competitive across, different businesses, different organizations the customer could choose between. Maybe their differentiators of where they happen to be located. And then, the big one is customer service. Introducing automation, I think a big fear is that's the whole value prop of the business is the high touch personal relationship of doing business with that distributor or that manufacturer. Talk to me, Nate, about how automation won't necessarily detract from that.
Yeah, I'd almost say even push back on the phrasing the question of how would it not necessarily, it is help with that. That's kind of the whole goal of it, right? So let's take a rep, for example, that is working with a client for a long time. They built up a good relationship. They talk frequently. And the client sends in these orders that are, these super long orders, hundreds. We've seen, near thousands of line items in some of these orders. So you can imagine that rep takes a long time for them to sit there and 10 key all those items in, right? So when you can automate the tedious parts that happen behind the scenes that the end customer never even sees, this rep can now turn around a quote within a matter of minutes, like, review and everything, making sure that everything is right there. So this customer, instead of waiting around for a day, maybe multiple days, maybe it's sitting in someone's inbox for quite a long time. We've heard stories about that kind of stuff. These end customers get their quotes or orders turned around within, could be, potentially just a matter of minutes. That is incredible customer service. Like, we're not trying to take away anything from customer service. In fact, the end customer, at least with our stuff, is not, they know that they're interacting with AI. Hopefully they see that the company that had great customer service now has these super powered reps that are even better at their customer service. Not only do they turn around the order within a couple minutes, but they've got all these prompts to them with this kind of deep learning that we do, saying, hey, these guys, they tend to order the same product every quarter. Reach out to them so you can say, hey, you sent this order. I know you guys tend to order the other stuff. We've got a promotion going on right now. I'm gonna, add that to your current order. Awesome, that's great. It just became very relevant to my process and not just, being nice to me or whatever that may be. So, I kind of prefaced at the beginning, I think I'm going to come back to this a lot, but the whole idea is let's take out that tedious stuff to make the customer service all that much better. Let's build these relationships. Let's get people talking instead of just sitting behind a keyboard and a monitor all day long. So yeah, I think that's the entire point of it, not a thing to worry about.
Question for both of you. The types of automation we're talking about, they're not always the pain points of the executive team. The executive teams and those that I talk with at merchant companies, oftentimes they're thinking about, how do I open a new branch, right? How do I expand my territory, add more customers, rebuild the organization in a way for the changing market times, whatever, ideas like that. They're not necessarily feeling the pains of order entry and how long that might or might not be taking. They don't necessarily see that their team's spending too much time managing tax tables. Is it worth it to implement something like Motivate, like Vertex, when the executive team's not feeling the pain?
Yeah, you know what? I'll jump in because I think, especially when we're talking about tax is one of those things where you don't really think about it until you have to. And especially when we're talking about, execs and, higher ups, tax is one of those things that, again, it's not going to be on their radar unless they dinged in an audit, right? Unless they all of a sudden, get exposed for maybe not doing things appropriately or maybe not calculating the appropriate rates in certain jurisdictions. And then all of a sudden they end up owing, hundreds of thousands of dollars to a jurisdiction. It's one of those things where, in my experience, a lot of times, especially nowadays, actually, we are seeing more and more executives come to the table kind of prepared to be proactive in this risk, right? They already, either from past experiences or even just, word of mouth, working with other, people in their industry, they know that tax is something that they want to get right. So, more and more, even though the actual manpower and the people that are doing these tasks aren't sitting at the executive board, it is the people at the executive level who end up really feeling that pain when it goes, incorrectly or wrong. So,
and I'd add on to that too. So the executives in your example, you're looking at metrics, KPIs, they're running numbers, figuring out, does a new branch make sense, that sort of thing. So all of these data points that they're looking at are also affected by, the automation. So whatever amount of, reps they need to have to make a branch work, if you make those reps a lot more efficient, that number goes down, and now that's affecting your KPIs, your metrics, then the math is different for opening that new branch. So absolutely, I think execs, even if they're not feeling the pain of sitting there and 10 keying in all day long, which is frustrating, they should at least be looking at the metrics, understanding how they can get a benefit from that automation.
Let's circle back to the question of that everybody's asking in everywhere. Will AI mean less jobs? When we look at a manufacturer or a distributor, and we look at, in this case, their customer service teams, their finance team, the folks that could leverage Motivate, the folks that could leverage Vertex, what will, I know, Nate, you've talked a little bit about how they can be empowered to sell more. Some of these folks have been there for 15, 20, the entire careers doing business a certain way. To kind of ask the hard question here, that how like that going to be impacted? How can a business embrace automation and take good care of all of its employees that are going to leverage it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Something we've spent a lot of time thinking about. We've been in this industry, I think, with a combined kind of three of us keep doing it over and over, about 25 years now. We've got to know a lot of these distributors, and a lot of them are these kind of started off as a mom and pop shop, and now they're a multi-generational family running the business, and they treat their employees as if they're family, right? They're not looking to come in and bring in some shiny new toy that cuts off a bunch of jobs and they lay off these people that they've been working with for 15 years. Like, that's just not what this industry is really interested in. So that kind of presents a problem, because order automation, what we started with, is kind of, it looks like it's coming after people's jobs, right? It makes so these reps can be a lot more efficient. They can take in a lot more orders at once. So if you look at purely with just that aspect, then yeah, it's a cost savings. You could potentially lay off a bunch of users or a bunch of your reps and then just use this order automation. But we knew that that wasn't really where a lot of these companies want to go, not the direction they're looking for. And so we said, what do we do now? These reps, they've saved a bunch of time. What are they doing? Are they sitting there twiddling their thumbs at their desk? So let's take that time and repurpose it. And so that's where we started building in kind of the extra features with the sales automation or insights part of it, where we can now empower those reps to go out and actually talk to people. And it was Ian Heller at DSG, I think we were talking about this, and he said that relevance helps tolerance, basically. So if you have people that are just, they have nothing to do, they're calling up their customers and they have no specific thing other than just, hey, I need to sell something, those customers are not going to be very tolerant to those phone calls. But if you call up with pertinent information that is actually helpful to that customer, not only do you become this, nice, again, kind of super powered rep that understands their customer really well, but that customer is going to enjoy those calls and know that they can say, when this guy's calling me, it's going to be very useful to me. So, could our software and, maybe if someone quits, they don't need to replace that person? Probably, but I don't think we're to the point where you're going to be laying people off, because we want to repurpose that time and get back to, I feel like I'm probably repeating this too much, but get back to where, AI takes care of the tedious part and we let those people build those relationships. Now they're not just order takers, but they're order makers. They're creating revenue, not just saving.
Yeah. And then you're speaking to both concerns of the executive team. How will this make me more money, and how will this save me money?
Exactly, yeah. So kind of trying to look at it as the whole solution, not just, half of it where you're cutting the cost, but let's add the revenue too. Let's repurpose that time. And I think that's the real kind of beauty of AI in this revolution, that we get to do those kind of things.
Yeah, makes sense. And then embracing it, even for the person who's been there their entire career, is all about an easy user experience of the software and making life easier than it was before.
Yeah. I've been in the construction industry, and I know how much people like to just talk, about the project they're working on, and how their project manager is just the worst, and whatever it may be. So let's give people time to do that again, build those relationships, and then the customer is going to come back more and more.
Brooke, what would you say?
No, I completely agree. Like Vertex historically, we've been around since the 70s, right? So definitely been an established indirect tax and compliance software, or I guess company, before software was ever even really a concept, right? Before AI was even a concept. So yeah, of course, as the industry has evolved, so has our product, so has our services, so has our software. But again, I think, it's what Nate just said was a really important piece. We're here to enhance, right? We're not here to replace. So, this software has, or this, I guess, product, our tax product, our compliance product, has always kind of been around just to help give people time back, not to replace, not to, help a company run more lean on resources and things like that. Again, it's really just about giving time back and adding value wherever we can.
Yeah. Something that was just mentioned is our kind of principle at Wagento as well, and that is relevance, adds tolerance, or however you phrased it, Nate. One of the things that as an e-commerce agency we saw for years was e-commerce agencies would just sit back and wait for the orders to come, and then if they weren't coming, they would just reach out and say, hey, do you want to do X, Y, and Z, these services that we offer? And that just is not a very welcome phone call, right? It's not helpful. You're not adding value. You're just selling. And so as a result, we've tried to do a lot of listening and learn from our merchants the problems they're facing, whether or not they overlap with our service offerings. And sometimes they do, and we'd say, okay, I know a way to solve that for you. And others they don't, and we can introduce a partner who solves that problem. So that relevance piece is huge. It's just in serving our clients better, and we have to have time to listen in order to stay relevant to what. All right, I want to open it up for Q&A. We're at the 40-minute mark here. I want to open it up. I want to hear from our attendees. I'm sure a lot of you are facing these types of problems at your own organizations, and there are probably some burning questions that we've not yet addressed. There's so much to talk about in the B2B e-commerce space as it pertains to automation. So drop your questions in the chat, please, and we'll take them as they come. The harder, the better. All right. We kind of talked about this in the beginning. There's a lot of AI software out there. There's a lot of push at different organizations. I think about the leaked memo of Shopify recently. Every single employee needs to be using AI or they're going to be laid off, basically was the gist of it. There's a lot of AI software. There's a lot of push to do it yourself. If you're a manufacturer or a distributor, you're busy running a business. How do you choose? I mean, how do you really make a selection of what AI software to plug into your business to add automation?
Yeah, I can start there. There's a lot to consider, and there's a lot of, like I mentioned before, a lot of dev shops out there that they have really talented developers, and they say, I'll make you AI anything you want. We have API access to the AI. We can throw in whatever question, and you can get results out of that. Sure, it's not hard to, again, kind of just open up ChatGPT and throw some things in there and feel like you're getting some good responses there. But when you start to benchmark and test and do it time after time, you got to make sure that those results are reliable. So when you're looking at these companies, I think an important aspect is making sure that the company has experience doing what they say they're going to do. If it's a custom dev shop that has been in an entirely different industry their whole lives, and now all of a sudden they're telling you that they'll make you, automated order processing, whatever it may be, without any experience in the distributor world or the manufacturing world, it's gonna be tough to get that fit to be just right. So I'd say first off, make sure the company you're working with has experience, and then check the associations that you're part of and see what's being recommended, who's had experience with what. It's just kind of important to do your research right now, because AI is the new gold rush, right? Everybody's trying to jump in there and do it. There are people doing it right, and there are people that are doing it in a way that is going to be really frustrating. We've heard both experiences from people we've talked to. So a little bit of research is going to go a long way, I think, in this point in time.
Subtle shout out there to the B2B e-commerce association.
Yeah.
Any other associations, Brooke or Nate, that you think are trustworthy sources for these kinds of decisions?
Well, there's a lot out there. AD is a big one.
Yeah, I know in the tax world, IPT is a big one. But I completely agree. I think it's really important to do your research, see what other people in the industry are doing, right? See what your competitors are doing, what they are using. There's a lot of value in taking a step back and making sure you're doing the right research, asking the right questions, seeing case studies from these AI companies, that, as Nate said, are actually able to do what they say they're going to do. As we all said, there is this rush, right, of 2025. AI is the new thing. You want to operate with a little bit of haste, right? Because as you said, you don't want it to be sloppy. If you put in a sloppy model, you're not going to get accurate results. It's going to end up being an absolute, right? You're going to have to rip it out and plug in something else. So yes, when it comes to AI, everybody's doing it. Everybody wants to do it. Do your research.
And I'll add to this that it's really helpful to have as unbiased partner in the mix as possible to ride shotgun with you. I've been through the process with a number of merchants who are evaluating, big kind of digital transformations, to use the buzzword. And every software they talk to seems to be a good fit, right? The salespeople, the solution engineers say we can make that work. Perfect. That's our ICP. You're right in our wheelhouse. And it's really helpful to have kind of the bad cop riding along with you and asking the hard questions and saying, show me, give me of a client in my industry, just really holding their feet to the fire. Because if you don't in the evaluation cycle, then you're going to find your feet to the fire 6 months into an implementation when you hit a major roadblock. All right, other questions. Speaking of implementations, these sound like big undertakings. What size business can pallet these types of projects?
Yeah, so I can jump in first. I would say, from a Vertex perspective, we work with companies of seriously all shapes and sizes. Back when I was actually doing the implementations of our software, I really had a lot of experience working with some of our enterprise customers. Now, being a solutions engineer, I actually work more in the $0 to $250 million space. So companies that have 250 million in revenue or less. So that's what we call our small to medium-sized business segment. Our pieces of software are truly appetizable for companies, again, of every shape and size. So pretty easy to scale.
Yeah, kind of same thing for us. I say traditionally AI has been around for a couple of years here, but when this kind of first stuff started coming out, it took a lot of research and a lot of investment dollars. And so some of those kind of order processing companies had to go with kind of bigger customers to make back those research dollars there. To a point now where we have some more answers, things are rolling a little faster. And so we're able to come in there and kind of just about any size of distributor, we have a package down to 5 million less, we can work with you. But traditionally it was up in the hundreds of millions revenue that we're able to do this, but certainly single digit millions revenue, works just great now.
And it could still be worth the investment, the implementation time.
Exactly, yeah.
The software evaluation cycles, off script here, the software evaluation cycles that I'm a part of, at the point the CFO comes in and says, what's the ROI and when can I expect it? Those can be hard questions to answer when there's a whole lot of different tools in play. And as this tells us all the time, we're unique. We do things a little bit differently. Every business is a little bit different. How should a merchant really evaluate ROI on a particular software? Is there a framework that you guys recommend?
We have a little kind of worksheet that we give to people when we're talking to them. Yeah. So the gist of it is that you should, try to figure out what the cost savings is. So you have to make some, estimations there of how much time your reps are doing on those tedious tasks right now. How much time can we save with the product? And so now you have a cost savings. And then you have to go in and try to predict, okay, now can we add revenue to this? And so what does that look like? So you can make assumptions about if a rep is doing active selling, how much could they make in an hour? So try to, I'd say, just as much as you can, try to bring in the whole picture of cost savings versus what they're going to do with their newfound time, and kind of try to add that all together to get that ROI. And hopefully you're seeing that ROI pretty instantly. I mean, a lot of this automation stuff, you plug it in and it goes, and there's not a lot of waiting around for it to start producing ROI, or at least the cost savings. And then, the added benefits, that might take a little bit of time for the users to get used to it. But yeah, I mean, we have a model we'll give you, but to the point of that is basically try to take the whole picture into consideration there.
And I think
Yeah,
a lot
and I
of
would
times.
say,
Go ahead, Brooke.
oh, I was just going to say, pretty much the same thing. We actually have an ROI calculator that we use in our opportunities as well, just to kind of show prospects, what the value is bring. And I would say the formula is pretty similar to what Nate described.
And I think sometimes those calculations are done in isolation. It's, hey, here's this project, here's my cost savings, here's the upside of it. Does that final number look to be worthwhile for all this work to implement, and the risk of something new and the change to the team? And that's a little bit tunnel, right? To say, do I do this project? This is the upside, or do I not do it? And if I don't do it, then there's no number associated with that sometimes for these evaluations. So I think it's always important to see, what is the no change dollar figure, right? Not just what's this project going to cost me or make me, or when will I make my money back? But if we don't do anything, what happens 12 months from now? And some of the opportunity costs, maybe they're not a dollar figure, although they could be. But I think they're important in that analysis to say, hey, today we have to say no to opening up a new channel because we can't handle the tax filing. Or today we have to hire 5 new reps to add X million dollars to our top line. And what would change if we implemented this software? So important in the consideration. All right, time for maybe 2 more questions. For Vertex, how customizable is your automation?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I would say, at Vertex, I really refrain from using the word customize. I think sometimes when you're talking about a software and you're saying, hey, especially since we just brought up how every business does have their own specialties and unique needs, when you talk about customizing, sometimes that can start sounding like a little bit daunting. Like, okay, we have to customize this to fit the needs of our specific business. I think what's really nice about the Vertex software, it's not so much that there's a need to customize, it's highly configurable, because we understand that all of our customers are utilizing very different systems, and every system that they're using it in a different way. So, you don't necessarily have to customize anything to make this work, but you're able to configure to match the expectations of the source system that you're integrating with. So, if that's an e-commerce storefront, an ERP, any of the systems.
All right, last question. All right, we'll talk about industries here. We've been talking about manufacturers and distributors and wholesalers, right? This is the category that this webinar is designed for. Is there an industry that you see adopting automation more than others in the broad bucket of manufacturing, distributors, wholesalers adopting, we'll call it commerce automation?
Good question. I think automation, at least what we're doing, works for a wide variety of different industries. There's very few that don't really work. There's every now and then you'll find something for what we're doing in particular, a highly customized one-off order. If that's your standard order, maybe the automation is not there for you yet. That takes a lot of back and forth between the customer, and you could do a chatbot or something. But I think the more kind of data-driven, repeatable tasks you have, the easier it is to set up the automation. I think we'll have AI automation for just about everything eventually down the road, right? But in the moment, the more repeatable the task is, the more AI and automation can apply to that. And I saw another question. I'll just address that one real quick. What strategies have you used to identify repetitive manual tasks and workflow, which I think kind of fits right into that. So for me personally, in my personal workflow, anything that I find myself being frustrated with, I tend to look at automation, see if there's anything that can help me out there. For our customers, we're kind of regularly interviewing them and watching their process and talking to them and figuring out what is working well, what's a frustration point, what's something that could be automated. So it's really just talking and understanding and trying to figure out what those are. I don't know that I have any kind of set criteria other than looking for the things that are very data driven. That helps the most with automation.
Brooke, any particular industries you think are embracing automation more within wholesalers, distributors, manufacturers?
No, I mean, I think from an industry standpoint, we see all three of those industries come up all the time. I'm always in discussions with distributors, wholesalers, manufacturers. I think it's really important. We've been talking about tax, and a lot of times in those specific industries, a lot of the liability isn't always on collecting tax from what you're selling, but there's a lot of additional places where we're able to help that automation. We can help with tax on purchases. We also help with exemption certificate management, which in the manufacturing, distribution, and wholesaler industries, a lot of your customers, especially in the B2B world, they're all going to be exempt, right? You have to be able to manage those exemptions. So I will say across those three industries, I don't think there's necessarily one industry doing it more than others, but all three are certainly extremely active industries for the Vertex customer portfolio.
Good. All right, time for one more. What kind of prediction and futuristic decision can we do with Motivate and Vertex?
Well, I'll jump in. I guess from a Vertex perspective, some future planning and things like that we provide. We do have a product that is all data analytics. And I think in the tax world, just some points that you brought up earlier, right? Like, okay, maybe I'm ready to expand. Maybe I'm ready to start selling into a new territory. What does that mean for me? When we start selling in new states and new places, at some point there is kind of a threshold that you reach where it is time to start filing tax returns in that state and making sure that you're in compliance, right? So we have tools that will help track your data and analyze it against every state's individual, what's called a nexus threshold, that really assists in just the planning and overall proactivity of your company as you guys are selling into new markets. So, we're able to help you track and plan when you're going to have to go and register in these new states based off of your historical sales data and trends. So that's definitely one, piece that we're able to help with that provides a lot of foresight.
That's the same kind of thing here. We're taking a look at historical data for individual customers, try to figure out what they've done in the past, and then we're comparing it to cohorts of similar sized customers in similar industries and that sort of thing, to then try to make some predictions around what is that customer probably going to buy in the next little while, or what would be a good upsell or a cross-sell based on these other kind of customers in that cohort of customers that are all very similar. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to surface that pattern before it gets to the point where the next spot in the pattern should have passed. We want to get there ahead of time, let the rep know, hey, this might happen in the next week or two, this typical buying pattern. So be aware of that when you talk to the customer, bring that up, let them know that you're watching for that order. And then again, you look like this super rep that just knows them incredibly well and is paying attention to them specifically. So mostly around sales automation is what we're doing. We've got plans for other cool things, but not yet.
All right, we're at time. I know we could go on and on. Automation in e-commerce and manufacturing and distribution is fascinating right now. It's evolving super quickly. And so thank you guys so much for the conversation. Nate, Brooke, really appreciate your expertise and your time here today. Where can people find you?
We're at gomotivate.com.
VertexInc.com.
GoMotivate.com, VertexInc.com. Take a look. You can find us all also on LinkedIn if you want to ask particular questions after the fact. Wagento.com is where you can find more about us. And thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Cody.
Thanks, everyone.